Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich, and we will be continuing and finishing up our unit here in Chapter 9, verses 23 to 28. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and get them, and get yourself a cup of coffee, and we will enjoy this unit together. Okay, so opening up here, we'll do so with Harold Attridge, and he hails from Yale University, and we'll see what he has to say. With the connection established between a purifying death and a covenant, the argument returns to the imagery of the Yom Kippur typology as that is applied to Christ's death in verses 23-24. This fourth segment of the central exposition corresponds in many respects to the second, 9:11-14. Both deal with Christ's unique entry into the heavenly sanctuary and its effects, and both offer contrasts between the earthly symbol and the heavenly reality. Previously, the emphasis was upon the victims and the superior value of Christ's blood. The contrast now focuses on the priests in the two cultic acts, and on the difference between the multiplicity of the old and the uniqueness of the new, thus the antitheses of one and many. Implicit in much of the argument is explicitly developed. So what he's trying to say there in this last point is that whereas the high priest had to enter often yearly, year by year, by the blood of a victim, a sacrificial victim, versus Christ's entry, that was unique, that was once and for all done in the heavenly sanctuary in heaven on our behalf. So this is the antithesis that is explicitly developed here in one of these comparisons that are being brought about in our passage. Okay, moving along. Okay, and coming to this particular slide, we will continue to do what we typically do, is to offer a translation and then to begin to explain and place a structure upon the text, and hopefully we'll be able to do this from the text itself, from its own structuring devices, and then I will walk through the structure, showing you basically how the text will divide itself into its own component parts. So we begin here with the which basically signals the start of a new pericope, and it's functioning inferentially here, which draws heavily upon the previous statement in verse 22, the neologistic maxim from verse 22, which states basically, in almost all things are being cleansed by blood in accordance with the law, and without the shedding of blood there is no forgiveness. So it's going to capitalize upon this statement, and then it's going to then use that capital to make this statement for the necessity for the cleansing of the earthly tabernacle, and then also for the cleansing of the heavenly tabernacle, for the the inauguration or the beginning of the new covenant, we'll have to be able to give some type of reason for the need for the cleansing of the heavenly tabernacle, and I think it'll become pretty obvious what that explanation will be. So let's just begin here with the text. Therefore, on the one hand, there is necessity for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed by these things. But the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter into the sanctuary made of hands, the copy of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf, nor that he would offer himself often, just as the high priest enters into the sanctuary yearly by the blood of another, since it would be necessary for him to suffer often from the foundation of the world, but now, once for all, at the consummation of the ages, he has appeared for the removal of sin by means of his own sacrifice. And just as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this the judgment, in this manner also Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, a second time he shall appear apart from sin to those who eagerly await him, a soterion, for salvation. Okay, so this is our text, and you know, as we said before, there's a signal here for the beginning of a new unit with this therefore here. So this is going to then sum up these the points that are going to follow. So we entitled this unit here, The Old and New Comparisons of Christ's Heavenly Sacrifice. So our author is very fond of this synchrisis type of speech, where he's constantly comparing Christ, and either the heavenly sanctuary or Christ's priesthood vis-a-vis the Aaronid high priests. And obviously this one here, in this particular unit, the Yom Kippur Day of Atonement is what comes out most clearly here in verses 25 to 26. And that's going to then color this whole unit in how we're to understand the offering here of Christ, and that includes everything from 23 onward here. So that is very, very important to be able to understand, just as Harold Attridge said. So the Yom Kippur typology is very, very important here. Okay, so within verse 23, not only does it signal we have a transitional moment here, but it does consist of a men deconstruction. So verse 23 in itself it's going to offer some type of correlation, and it will become obvious how the contrast will develop. But so that in and of itself is going to be one unit. So we have here the inferential comparison of Christ's heavenly sacrifice and the old covenant's earthly sacrifice. So we have the necessity of the cleansing of the earthly tabernacle, as well as the necessity of the cleansing of the heavenly tabernacle. A and B. So A is going to be the men, and the second half of the verse 22b is going to be the dis statement. So it's just, on the one hand, there's a necessity for the copies of the things in heaven to be cleansed by these things. There's A, and then B. But the heavenly things themselves with greater sacrifices than these. Okay, so there's your men deconstruction. That's going to be our first point. So we're going to have three major points here. Underneath are heading to are two contrasting statements. First, there's a basis statement, because you'll come down here in verse 24 and we got a gar. So we're going to have a basis statement. And then the second contrasting statement is going to then be based upon a hina clause. So it's going to be a purpose. Okay? So we're going to have these two contrasting statements. The first is a basis statement. The second one's going to be a purpose statement. Okay? And not to bore you, but I just want to look at the big structure. And then when you come down here to verse 27, we're going to have this correlative phraseology here, and kath hasan, and just as, okay, so also Christ. Okay, so you need to look here at 27 to 28. It's set up in correlation. Just as da-da-da-da-da, so also Christ da-da-da-da-da. So whatever's going on here with humanity is also going to mirror itself with Christ. Okay? And so, and how he does this is that he takes a popular proverbial statement concerning death and judgment of mankind. Okay, so there's this, I guess it's a common vernacular statement during the author's day that stated that just as it is appointed for men to die once, and after this, the judgment. Okay, so he set this in correlation, so also Christ. So Christ is going to have to only die once, not many times, and that's kind of been the argument of the preceding statement here, especially here in Part B, in 25 to 26, that Christ didn't suffer, constantly from the foundation of the world on a yearly basis. Okay, just like as it is appointed for men to die once, so also it's appointed for Christ to die once. He's only going to do this sacrifice one time. Okay, and then after this, the judgment. So Christ, since he lived a sinless life, when he had to I guess stand before God at his death, it was victory, because he lived a sinless life, and so it was it became our salvation, and that's the very last word of the unit, that Christ did all this for our salvation, and that is going to be the result of Christ's appearance, is for our salvation, for those who eagerly await him. Okay, so this text really does it. There's three. It begins with for the necessity of the cleansing of the heavenly and earthly tabernacles, and then there's these two contrasting statements of Christ's entrance into the heavenly sanctuary and this Yom Kippur offering. And then it ends here with the correlative grounds between humanity's death and judgment with that of Christ. Okay, so it's this parenthetical proverbial saying concerning death and judgment set to correlation. Okay, first man and then Christ. Boom. All right. So this is how the unit really breaks down itself. You just have to take your time to, at how you go about looking at all the clues within the text, like we have the therefore here to signal, a new paragraph. And we have a mende construction, and then we have this gar basis statement, and then we have a hina clause. Okay, and both of these set up correlations or contrasts here, verse 24 in and of itself, and then then you got 25 and 26, and then 27 and 28 has its own correlation of setting up humanity's, destiny to die once, and after that the judgment, with that of Christ. And so it really does break itself down very nicely. And there's I guess there's it's just too perfect, the text. But you have to take. This didn't happen. I just didn't just conjure all this up overnight. Doing structural analyses it takes a lot of contemplation, and you have to basically just memorize this text to the best of your ability, and then start looking for the emerging different conceptualities that the text produces, and then you begin to itemize them according to their unitary status, how they fit into different units and different thoughts. And so this is basically my development of that. So hopefully this will be helpful for you in your teaching and preaching, so you can take this material that I'm doing here, and then you can modify. Feel free to modify any of this, use any of it. I don't care. I'm not, this is all just, this is the gospel, I'm not doing this for, for anything. I'm just doing this to share whatever little bit of knowledge I have with you all, okay? And then hopefully, some of this becomes useful to you, and you can see the flow of the text for yourself. And I guess we'll move on from here, and we'll look at the theology of the text when we come here to the next slide. We'll look at some diagrammatical analysis. Okay, then coming here to this is verse 23. Okay, and so we'll be looking here basically at the necessity of the cleansing of the earthly and heavenly tabernacles. And you can see here how this is a men deconstruction. We have the inferential particle here on stilts here, and to be separate outside of the sentence, and then basically what we have here is we have our base line here, okay, and then we have our secondary baseline down here, and they're joined by this men deconstruction. And you'll notice here that we have ananke here, and it's functioning as a predicate nominative, and we have an ellipsis here, and an ellipsis is basically, just means something that was left out. And so our copula verb ami, either estin, or some people can put in the ain here for the past tense. So we could we could put in either ain or estin here, and then so what happens with when we have a predicate nominative, and then it's followed by this by an infinitive, is that the infinitive takes its subject in the accusative, and so it becomes basically the subject of the text. And because what happens here is that this estin here is functioning as an impersonal verb. That means it's not starting with he or she, okay? It's, you're going to either start it with it or there, okay? And so it's impersonalized, okay? So it's very typical when you have these impersonal verbs with an infinitive, that the infinitive is functioning here as in its nominative force, and functioning as a noun. So therefore we will look at this as therefore on the one hand there is a necessity for the copies of the things in the heavens to be cleansed by these things. So we have this infinitive phrase here, and it's functioning as the substantively, okay, and we have this tone here. So the article, I believe that, when it was, back in the ancient days or whatever, that it was basically functioning as a demonstrative pronoun, and so it's doing so here substantively, so it is necessary, or there is a necessity for the copies of the things. So this is how you're going to translate tone, of the things in the heavens to be cleansed by these things. Okay, so what are these things? To be cleansed by these things. Okay, so what does that mean? So this is talking about the earthly tabernacle, and so how the earthly tabernacle was cleansed was either by calves. We saw that before, right? Calves and goats, right? And then we had the mention of the offering of the red heifer, the ashes, and so that was, water mixed with the ashes, and then the scarlet wool, and then the hyssop, okay, which was the application method. So anyhow, and that the whole see the calves and the goats, the calf. The bullock here was offered for the Aaronid priest, whoever the high priest was that year. He had to offer a sacrifice for himself and for his house. That is the Levites. Okay, so he had to offer a sacrifice to cleanse the tabernacle, for his own sins and then for the sins of his house. And this was done by the means of offering a calf or a young bullock here, okay? And then he had to bring in the blood of the goat, for that was for the sins of the people. And then beyond just the sins of the people, then there was the defilement that people contract or become contaminated, and by defilement, not so much by their own doing, but just by the course of living in this world. And so the offering typically of the ashes of a heifer was for contact with the dead. So when a person became they became ceremonially unclean. Okay, and so we would look at this like something like somebody's in need of a pine sol prayer, a disinfectant prayer, because somehow they became contaminated in the process of living life, and they've come in contact with something unclean or the dead. Okay, so there is a necessity for the earthly sanctuary to be cleansed, okay, by such sacrifices. And we're going to see also that it's also going to apply down here to the heavenly realm as well. But with better sacrifices than these, okay. But the same type of cleansing needs to take place here at the heavenly level. Okay, so we'll come to that, and you can see that when we come to this part, look at all this, all these lacunas here. We have, even the infinitive has to be, it's not spoken in the text. Okay, there's just all the text says, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. But basically, in order to fill it all in, you're going to have to translate it as. But there is a necessity for the heavenly things themselves to be cleansed with better sacrifices than these. Okay, so then, so that means that Christ's sacrifice here is going to be is what's going to be compared to that as better, and so then we're going to have to now talk about. So we have here this the heavens themselves. Here we have the use of a personal pronoun with the intensive form here, auta here. So so we'll see this use here, that the personal pronoun can have a different function here. So it's the heavens themselves, okay, and so it kind of takes on that reflexive attitude here with this intensive force. I guess here, what are we going to say? Why does heaven have to be cleansed? Well, because there's something new here, okay? Underneath the old covenant, okay, things had to be cleansed because of human contact with where God dwelt, okay? So God dwelt, in one sense, he dwelt above the mercy seat in the old covenant in the tabernacle that Moses was instructed to make. Okay, but Moses was instructed to make it according to the pattern that he saw. So that is in heaven, that there's the real tabernacle exists in heaven. Okay, and so in the Old Testament, in the old economy, when you died, by and large, everybody went to Abraham's bosom. And we can see that whole thing there in Luke 16, where you had the rich man and Lazarus, and the rich man died and he went to hell. And then he said in hell he lifted up his eyes and he saw Lazarus over in Abraham's bosom. So hell is beneath us. And in the Old Testament economy, everybody went to Sheol. Okay, and then in Sheol there was a big chasm. And there was a heated side, and then there was an air-conditioned side where Abraham's bosom was. So if you lived in accordance with the first covenant, and you lived by faith underneath the first covenant, well, then you went to the air-conditioned side of Sheol with Abraham's bosom. And then when Christ died and went to hell, he took captivity captive, and now he took everybody to heaven. Okay, and so now that humans are now, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Now that humans are going to heaven, well, then the heavenly, wherever humans go, there's going to be some trouble. Okay, and so the heavenly things needed to be cleansed because we are going there now, okay? Humanity is. Now, there are exceptions in the Old Testament where you had Elisha, you had Enoch and Elijah going, ascending to heaven or whatever. Those are the exceptions, just like, it is appointed for men once to die, and after this the judgment. Hey, there's, a lot of occasions in the New Testament where there's people who were resurrected from the dead, like the other Lazarus fellow in John chapter 12 that died, and on the fourth day Jesus rose him from the dead. Well, he didn't get his glorified body, he just got his earthly body raised from the dead, and then he had to basically die twice. Okay, so there are exceptions to just about every rule in a very limited scope. But I think the analogy works here fine, that now that in the new economy of the New Testament, humanity upon death, goes to heaven. And they're no longer going down to the air-conditioned side of Sheol. Like I said before, the blood of bulls and goats could get you to the air-conditioned side of Sheol, but the blood of Christ can take you to heaven. Okay, and so then so somewhere between the moment that you die and then the next moment when you enter heaven, like this book later on states that heaven is the place of the righteous souls that have been made just, or have been made perfect. Okay, so in heaven, we're going to a place where there are righteous souls that have been made perfect. So that takes place upon our entrance into heaven, and so when we get to heaven, we're no longer dealing with this sin that we are down here at the present moment, right? We struggle now, dealing with temptations here on earth, but after death, when we enter heaven, we're no longer going to have that struggle. It's not going to exist in heaven, because now our righteous souls will have been made perfect, and that is a contribution of this book of Hebrews that comes a little later here, and we'll see that when we come upon it. But I think that should answer the question why the heavenly things need to be cleansed. It's because humans are now coming to heaven. It's just pretty much that simple. And then I guess here we need to look at para here, para tau tos. This para here, basically it's now functioning as a comparative here, with better sacrifices than these things, okay? And that's going to refer back up to here, okay? Than the earthly ones, okay? So hopefully that, by seeing this particular, the way the anatomy of the sentence here, how grammar functions here, it's easier for you to see than how verse 23 it divides itself into two places, and it's really easy to see by using diagrammatical analysis. Okay, now coming here to 24, which is the first contrast, which is the basis statement, gar here. So our the way the sentence runs: for Christ did not enter into the sanctuary made with hands, and then we have this appositional restatement phrase, the copy of the true things. But, and then it doesn't, the verb is missing, but we have to supply it. But he entered into heaven itself, okay? So we have here another use of the, personal pronoun used intensively, into heaven itself. And then we have this infinitive phrase, to appear now in the presence of God on our behalf, okay? So what we have here, this sets up a comparison. This strong but here. So it's stated negatively, and then it's stated positively, and then the first part talks about Christ's entrance into heaven itself, and then the purpose of that entrance is to appear before God, and then the result or the advantage is it's for on our behalf down here. Okay, so that's how this all here functions, I guess diagrammatically and theologically. Okay, perfect. Long here, and this is just setting up here. Look, coming here to 25 and 26, we will read it. Nor that he might offer himself often, as the high priest enters into the holy place yearly by the blood of another. Since, so this is a causal reason, since it would be necessary for him to suffer often from the foundation of the world. And then we have the inverse. But now, once for all, at the consummation of the ages, he has appeared for the removal of sin by means of his sacrifice. Boom. And it goes back to the singular here, which is appropriate. And so then this here is going to then take up this second contrast purpose statement, and for the Yom Kippur offering, that's the operative conceptual idea behind all this. Because remember, he's talking about the high priest entering yearly, by the blood of another. So that goes back and takes up the whole Yom Kippur typology here. That's being played off here to compare Christ and the Aaronid high priests of the old covenant. Okay, and then so the positive statement here is that he appears once for all at the consummation of the ages. The purpose is for the removal of sins, and the means of which is by means of the instrumentality of his own sacrifice, his own death. And excuse me, I'm had a burp. So I just wanted to just go over that and just make sure we're explaining the text as we're going through it here. And then this here is just an example here of verse 26, and so we have the sentence starts off with with ellipsis, Christ entered in order that, okay, so nor did Christ enter into heaven in order that he would offer himself often. And then it drops down here to host pair, a subordinate clause here, as the high priest enters yearly by the blood of another. Okay, and enters into the sanctuary yearly by the blood of another. That is meaning the blood of the calf for himself, and also then the goat for the people. And then we have another a causal purpose clause here, epi, since it would be necessary for him to suffer often from the foundation of the world. Okay, so then this is here we have this use of the impersonal use of a verb here. It is necessary, and then we have the pathane here, the infinitive, to then form the subject for him to suffer often. Here, often from the foundation of the world. But, okay, and so then we have the contrast being drawn here. He has appeared now once for all at the consummation of the ages, and the purpose, ace, for the removal of sin by means of his sacrifice. Boom. So this is explaining how the neogrammatical analysis develops, and to understand how each clause, how it fits and situates itself within the framework of the baseline. Okay, and then here now we're coming here to verses 27 and 28 here. And so he's been very fond here in this whole unit of using the infinitive as part of the noun. And we have a chi here, and so it's a conjunction, and it's going linking clauses together. And so we have here, and so we have, what's really important here is we have this correlative use here of this phrase kath hasan together with hutos. Okay, so and as much as in this manner also Christ. So he's going to take up here a proverbial statement. It is appointed for men to die once, and after this is the judgment. In like manner also Christ, having been offered once, purpose clause, for the bearing of the sins of many, he shall appear a second time apart from sin to those who eagerly await him for salvation. Boom. So we have this last correlative correlation of the correlation of how men are appointed to die once and then a judgment. So Christ was also appointed to die once, not many times. He wasn't supposed to be sacrificed many times, just once. Okay, he died once, but it was his death was sacrificial. And so here this takes up Isaiah 53 here, the suffering servant. I believe this may come from verse 12 here. We'll find out. We'll look at it here. We'll see the text of Isaiah, where our author here is making an allusion to the suffering servant, and then he adapts it to a priestly context. So now he's coloring and filling in the development of how we're to theologically understand this motif here of the suffering servant, and now it's to be wedded in a priestly interpretation of Christ our high priest. Okay, and then so let's we'll move on from here. We don't need to. That's just showing you that verse 27 is really a parenthetical proverbial saying concerning death and judgment set to correlation with Christ. Okay, that's how it's functioning. Because you'll notice that people will typically quote verse 27 completely devoid of the context of this passage in Hebrews. It's simply because it's theological. It's a theological statement that's just set to correlation. So it's very handy, and that's why people would take it and use it outside of the context in which it is situated here, which is fine. That's what the theologumenon is supposed to do. This theological statement is supposed to be used in a broader context, not but here it's being set to correlation to be compared with Christ, so that just as man dies once, so Christ is only going to die once. He doesn't need to be sacrificed many times. So it's just basically confirming what he said above here. Okay, especially right here, point Dalet here, the basis statement drawn from multiple sufferings. This is a second class conditional clause here, with only the apodosis being mentioned. The protasis was not mentioned. It was an ellipsis, of course. But anyhow, so then Christ, when his death was for our life and our resurrection and our salvation, and so Christ is not going to be judged. His judgment turns into victory, okay, because death couldn't hold him because he never sinned. So the cords of death were burst from him, and then so his death was once for all. The purpose was to bear the sins of many, and the result is that he will appear a second time for salvation. For it will result in our salvation, who are eagerly awaiting him. Okay, and so this is apodekamenos here, here, and this is just from dekomai, okay, and then it's prefixed first with an ek, and then it's doubly prefixed. We have an apa and an ek attached directly to the base of the verb, and so it's an intensive form of a verb. So those who eagerly await him, and this is deponent, and it's present tense. So who's eagerly awaiting Christ? It's those at his second coming. Okay, as he will appear a second time. So he's not going to appear. There's no secret. Sorry, folks. My theology was cut on the teeth of George Eldon Ladd. I'm definitely a post-tribulationist because I don't find any scripture to support the part of a pre-tribulational rapture. I asked you, okay, you can write down here, where is the pre-part of a chronology for the pre-tribulation rapture of the church? Show me a verse that gives you the chronology telling you that it takes place the pre-tribulation rapture. So if you believe in this, you have to have scripture. I want you to share with me your scripture here and enlighten all of us. And if you have one, then I will devote a whole thing to it. And I would love to be a pre-tribulation rapturist. I would love to be able to believe in that, but I just can't. There's nothing in the scripture to support such a escapism type of some rapture where we escape everything. And this says that that he will appear a second time. So there's I just heard this week, you guys, that some guy said, oh yeah, First Thessalonians chapter 4 is a rapture, right? And he says that's his pre-tribulation rapture there in 1 Thessalonians 4. But he has no chronology that comes out of 1 Thessalonians 4 that proves any of that. But he also said, wow, there's a second rapture in Matthew 24 that's post-tribulational. And so this guy actually believed in two raptures. And so, you know what, folks? Guess what? If you miss the first rapture, don't worry, you can always be a part of the second. So if you were drunk, or if you were messing around and you were sinning and you were off drinking and all that stuff, and you missed the first rapture, don't worry about it. You can always be a part of the second rapture. Okay, Matthew 24, that's post-tribulational. Okay, so don't worry about it. If you missed the first one, don't worry, party up. You can always be part of the second one. So this is amazing. These pre-tribulationists are they're becoming heretics, and because their doctrine has no place in Scripture. So please feel free, inform me. feel I'm very at home in whether New Testament or Old Testament theology. I'm at home, and so please enlighten me. Okay, so coming here, and in fact this is Isaiah here. It's 53:12 here, and so we have, therefore I will apportion to him with the great and the mighty he shall divide. With the mighty he will divide the spoil, because he laid bare his soul to death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many and interceded for transgressors. So this phrase here, right here, Vehu chet rabin nasa, and he bore the sin of many. He bore the sin of many. So this here then is the translation here of the Septuagint. For this cause he shall inherit with the many, and he shall divide the booty with the strong, because he delivered over his soul to death, and he was reckoned with the lawless, and he bore the sins of many. So this is where our text comes up here, and so our author here is referring to this last phrase here in the last distich here of chapter 53, and so he's picking up here on line A, and he bore the sins of many. And so this here is our author's definitely alluding to this, and so then he's appropriating it, he's re-signifying it for the high priestly sacrifice of Jesus. So we go here from this Avdi, my servant, passage of Isaiah, and then now the Avdi is becoming the Archieros, the high priest. So this is what our author's doing. So he's kind of baptizing it in the priestly language, but he's definitely appropriating this here from Isaiah. And then, I don't know if you listened last week here. You can. I don't need to go over Bakhtin again, but you can understand how intertextuality, Bakhtinian dialogism here would that cultured speech is speech that is refracted through the authoritative canonical medium. So the cultured speech of our author here is that he's going to then, his speech is going to come, he's going to echo the authoritative canonical medium of authority, which is the Hebrew Bible. So he's gonna pull from Isaiah, and he's going to then situate it within his own writing here, and so these words of Isaiah here, through it all, the word does not forget its path of transfer, cannot completely free itself from the power of those concrete contexts into which it had entered. By no means does each member of the community apprehend the word as neutral element of language system, free from intentions and untenanted by the voices of its previous users. Instead, he receives the word from another voice, a word full of that other voice. The word enters his context from another context
and is permeated with the intention of other speakers. So we're going to see the intention of the Isaiah here being brought to bear upon this phrase here, and he bore the sins of many. And so this is some of the most crucial problems in the sociology of language usage is the use of appropriated materials from author to author. And so words don't just come tabula rasa. They already come complete with meaning and intentions. The voice of the words are already tenanted. There's somebody occupying that word. Okay, and it's Isaiah. Okay, so this is all cultured speech, a speech refracted through the authoritative canonical medium. This is Bakhtin. Get with it. And he's a master. What can I say? And then we can say that Christiva picks up on with Bakhtin, and every text is constructed as mosaic of citations. Every text is an absorption transformation of another text. And so in the place of the notion of intersubjectivity, that of intertextuality is situated, and poetic language can be read at least comme double, as double. Okay, so there's a little Christive in there. And so this is where meaning is always context-driven, folks, okay? Get used to this phrase, meaning is always context-driven. And sometimes to get to the context, you got to understand the intersection of texts where they meet. So if you didn't know that phrase that we've been looking at, he bore the sins of many, came from the book of Isaiah, you would have there's a whole meaning of the text you miss. So there's cultured meaning in text for people who are aware of the author's use of allusion and appropriation and resignification. Okay, and if you have any comments, please go ahead and contact me. Leave, like, subscribe, and share this content. This is Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics. Signing out until next time.